Hey everyone, Trevor with HustlePaintball.com, and I have a video for you on the long-awaited TechT Paintball Fang Trigger system for the X7 Phenom. This is something people have been screaming for, and that's because they got this great high-quality X7 Phenom by Tittman, and they don't have a double trigger to install on it to really up their game. TechT finally resolved that issue by releasing their great Fang Trigger system that's worked on all other Tittman markers. So I'm going to show you how to install it, and then we're going to take it outside for a demo and show you how it works. So here we have TechT Paintball's Fang Trigger system for the Tittman X7 in their signature stylish packaging. I'm just going to go ahead and open it up really quickly. And you can see here we do have a double trigger guard, the Fang trigger itself, and everything necessary to install it. This comes with everything you would need. Had the pin that goes on the inside of the ball bearing right there. 2 adjustment screws. The longer one is actually to adjust the magnet, and we'll get further into that in a little bit. And the shorter one is just to adjust the back slot. And then you have 3 different springs for the trigger itself that just have different strengths to kind of choose exactly how strong you want your trigger pull to be. So we're going to go ahead and move on and show you exactly how to install this. Alright, so let's begin by removing these 2 push pins on the grip frame right there. And then we can just pull the grip frame straight off. Your next step is going to be to flip the selector switch straight up and pull it out. And then what you have left is your trigger assembly right here. Now, before we go ahead and actually get in on installing the trigger itself in the trigger assembly, we're going to pull that aside and we're going to have to do the trigger guard first. So you're just going to want to make sure you have a Phillips head screwdriver and start unscrewing these screws. Now that we have all those screws removed, we can just go ahead and lift up on the 2 grip halves and pull out your single trigger guard and install the new double trigger guard. Once you have that installed, you can go ahead and put the screws back in. As you can see, we did get the new double trigger guard installed, and TechT added a nice little feature in with this one. You can see it's made out of a more rubbery-like material, which is still going to protect your trigger, but if you fall, it's not going to snap and have to be replaced on you. So now that we have that taken care of, let's go ahead and move on to the trigger assembly itself. And this is something you want to pay close attention to because there are a couple of little pieces that you just want to make sure you get in the right spot. We're going to start by pulling off the top of the trigger assembly. Gotta be a little more careful than I normally would so you guys can see everything. So let's just remove the sear really quickly. I do want to point out that this does actually have multiple different ways of being oriented. You want to make sure that you have it the correct way. So the way it is when it's installed is this part that tapers up. It kind of curves to the left a little bit, or as you'd be looking at it to the right. You want to make sure that one is pointed down. So when it's on the trigger itself, this more flat, kind of tapered in like an arrow portion is exactly like that. The next thing we want to do is be careful about removing the trigger itself because there is a spring that has a high chance of flying all over the place and can easily be lost. So go ahead, and I'm going to try and show you how to do this without blocking your vision. Kind of get your finger on top of the spring there, that way you can hold it down and pull up on that trigger. That way your spring, you're holding on to it as it snaps out and it doesn't go all over the place. Now that we got everything removed, let's move on to the next step. On this next step, what we want to go ahead and do is replace the trigger pin right here. You want to remove that by just pushing down on it, and it will come right out like that. And the new pin, right here, you can see that there is a ribbed side and a not ribbed side. You want to make sure that when installing it, you actually push it through this side first with the rib end backing it up. So you want to get it through like that. And you can see as I push it through, it's going to go in. And if you need to use a flat surface, go ahead and do that. Just push it down, so that's going to make it flush with everything else on there. The next step is to take our Fang trigger itself and go ahead and put it on the pin. Now it's going to fit a little tighter than your previous trigger did, and that's just because the ball bearing and the pin are made to be very, very similar in size. That way it sticks to it and you can really see how smooth that ball bearing is. Like I showed you earlier, we are using the weakest spring because I really like a weak trigger pull. And I'm going to try and show you how to install it without getting in your way with my big hands here. Just going to squish the spring. Try and get it in there. It's kind of feisty, but as you can see, I got it in there without any issues. It's going to be a bit of a trial and error to get it in. It's kind of hard for me to show you the perfect way to get it in. You're just going to have to do your best. Sometimes it's going to go a little wonky and you have to restart. Now that we have that installed, we can go ahead and get our sear back on. Once again, make sure that you have it oriented the correct way, and go ahead and put the top of your trigger assembly back on. You can see it's all put together, and the last pieces that we have to install are the adjustment screws. I'm going to go a little further in depth on that. I have the shorter one with that kind of greenish tip and the longer one. The longer one is going to be put in on the top hole right there, and that actually adjusts the magnet. We're going to go further in depth on that, but really quickly I'm just going to install both so I can get it back into the grip frame itself. And the shorter one is just going to adjust your back slop on your trigger. Once again, I'm just going to install that so I get it back on the grip frame right here, and I'll go more in depth on the trigger itself and what you need to do. So as you can see, I screwed them in just enough to where the top one was just touching the magnet. I didn't tighten it down at all, and the lower one was, the green part was just pushing through. This was just to get them installed, so when I put the trigger assembly back into the grip frame, I can actually adjust the marker from there. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the trigger assembly back inside the grip frame, and it's going to go in exactly how you took it out. So you get it in there. Get your selector switch pointing directly vertical like so. And now you have your trigger frame assembled. So now what we really need to do is actually install the grip frame on the marker itself and show you actually how to make this trigger work. There's some adjustment required on the magnet, and you need to make sure that you do it correctly, or else this trigger is not going to work every time you pull it. We're just going to install the grip frame back on the marker the way it came off. So you just get it on there and slide it on. There you go. Get your push pins back in. There we go. And now comes the fun part. So at this portion, you do want to make sure that you have your gun aired up, because you need to start it in the semi-auto mode with just the selector switch facing this way. That actually turns the Phenom into mechanical mode. So you need to have air or else it's not going to fire. I'm just going to pull the trigger here and it's going to fire. Now, see if you can see it right here. This adjustment screw, you want to make sure that it's at a point where it's not going to stop you from firing. So you can tighten it down while you have the trigger pulled to the point where it's actually touching the back of the grip frame. If you're like me and you really don't care about that because it goes as far as it needs to go regardless, then you can either take it out or just kind of leave it installed in and not actually touching anything. I'm going to do it correctly right here just to make sure. See, it's still firing and it's touching the end every time. So this is the important part. When you switch it to the electronic mode and I pull the trigger, it doesn't fire. That's because the magnet isn't passing through the Hall effect. That's what the second adjustment is for, is you want to hold the trigger down and actually tighten the screw until the marker fires. I'm going to show you this way because it's a lot easier. I'm going to tighten this adjustment screw right here and it's going to fire. What that means is that the magnet has finally passed through the Hall effect. I've already tightened it about 4 quarter turns at this point, so it's right about at that time where it's actually going to activate. So it just fired right there. Now, you do want to tighten it about another quarter turn to 2 quarter turns to make sure that it actually fires every time you pull the trigger. You can tighten it more, but you do want to be careful not to tighten it too far, because that's just going to make sure that the trigger doesn't actually reactivate when you release it, meaning once again it's actually not going to fire every time you pull the trigger. So now I think we got the magnet exactly where I want it to be. Let's just test it out. I kind of like that. Alright, so we're just going to test out this nice new trigger that I got installed on there. So as you can see, once we have the TechT Fang Double Trigger installed on the marker, I was able to shoot it really, really fast on straight semi-auto. And that's the nice thing about it, is once you have it installed, it's really going to bring your Phenom up to the next level. And if you have any questions about it, go ahead and send us an email at videos@hustlepaintball.com. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, read our blog, and of course, check out the website. We have everything that you need, including the TechT Fang Double Trigger, all TechT products, and anything you need in paintball at www.hustlepaintball.com. Thanks again for watching, guys. We'll see you soon.